One. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to this post Easter school holidays, although apparently still in school holidays mode mentality for some. um, Exchange brought to you by BCSDA. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Andrew Petersen, and I am the CEO of the Business Council for Sustainable Development Australia. And welcome to this exchange. Exchange being what it says on the side of the tin, which is all about an exchange of ideas, intelligence, information, reports, tools, resources, whatever is coming across my desk through to your desk, and most importantly, through to your business processes, strategies, and reporting. A big welcome to those who are members, but also hello, hello, hello to those who are not members. Thank you for joining us, and we trust that you will find this of interest and relevance to your daily work. All right, I'll stop rabbiting on. And in opening, as we do always, I wish to acknowledge that I am coming to you from the land today of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I acknowledge their elders past, present, and emerging, and particularly welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders who are joining us today. And if you would like to include in the chat function where you're coming from in terms of First Nations lands, we would very much welcome that as well. A brief reminder that this is very much a non-commercial forum. Our discussion today is for general information and shared insight only. And as a reminder, it is in meeting format under Zoom, not webinar format. So A, you can see each other. B, you can talk to each other. But most importantly, you can use the chat function to share with one another. Please don't discuss competitively sensitive matters such as pricing, customers, markets, future commercial strategy, or anything else that could raise competition or antitrust concerns. And guess where that's come from? All right, today's session is actually in three parts. The first is I'm going to give you a quick run through of what's been being reported in ESG Snapshot for those of you who haven't caught up. Secondly, we're going to give you a briefing on our findings regarding the Treasury Laws Amendment (brackets Financial Reporting System Reform and brackets Bill 2026. What a title. And then we're going to hear from Simon Cook from Forico, who's going to give us a really practical discussion on a really important update that Forico have recently released, which is I think their fifth natural capital report. And if there's any time for deep Q&A, then I very much look forward to that. So let me jump to Snapshot and ensuring that you can actually see it on the screen, which is always a fun thing to try and do, Andrew. There we go. So again, a reminder to those who may not have caught up, ESG Snapshot is very much a member feature and benefit of those who are BCSD members. And most importantly, it's a member feature for the organisation, not just for the individual. So as an organisation, you will have a number of people who in various forms and parts of your organisation may find content that comes through on a weekly basis through ESG Snapshot of relevance. And so if you get it, but you don't have colleagues that are getting it, two ways of addressing that. Firstly, let me know. Or secondly, just send them a link to ESG Snapshot, and behind the scenes, we'll see them register, and then we will put them into the member category going forward so that they absolutely get it as part of the member package for your organisation. So if you've got 20 people, 20 get it. If you've got 200 people, 200 can get it. It's yours to make a decision about who gets it. And hopefully you've noticed in the last couple of weeks that we're getting a little crisper, a little sharper, a little more intelligence focused about what we're reporting to you. And going forward, you're going to see even more content that some of you may have seen in other fora. We're now putting it into Snapshot as well. If I just go through the last four, so issue 124 through to 127, which came out this morning. 124 was a really interesting conversation about convergence and the highlighting of trade, disclosure, infrastructure, and energy issues that are now being judged through a lens of resilience, credibility, and competitiveness. We highlighted the EU-AU Free Trade Agreement as a good example. And in that, it was not just a market access story, but bringing Australian business closer to European expectations on standards, procurement, investability, and investment and sustainability. So what you're going to see in the next few months are some further insights and resources as we developed reports around each of those elements as we start seeing the work that the federal government and federal parliament will bring about to introduce the free trade agreement into parliament for ratification. So if you haven't already read, there is a sustainability chapter in the free trade agreement, and there are expectations around companies that engage with the European Union under the FTA that you will need to be aware of. And I'll come to one that sort of jumped out even this week, in fact, last week, and we've reported on this morning. That issue also picked up IFRS and ISSB sector work on agriculture power, and there is already a piece of information I think we've circulated to some of the members that we're going to be starting a consultation, an internal consultation about responding to that. So if you haven't seen it, drop me an email and I will put you onto the circulation list. There was also some really interesting updates on national expectations for data centres and tougher fuel market enforcement. Hardly a surprise given what's happening. So something worth looking for. In terms of 125, issue 125, we highlighted the governments are really starting to move beyond targets into issues of reserves, finance, supply powers, and market design. In particular, we highlighted some new strategic reserve legislation for fuel and critical minerals. There was also a update on the $6.15 billion National Reconstruction Fund concessional finance update, because it's been brought forward. So if you have opportunities around that, or you in the finance sector are looking for collaboration on public-private sector finance, you should be looking at that. There was also some interesting updates in that issue on fuel transparency tightening across Tasmania, Victoria, and Western Australia. Hardly surprised given current geopolitical circumstances, but we've gone and highlighted what it is and where to go looking for it on government websites if you don't know about it. And there was big news about the GRI now consulting on tougher pollution standards. So if you come within or you embrace the GRI, and Marianne's nodding furiously, it's something to pay attention to. I have already drafted a draft response to the pollution standards, and I will be circulating that to some key members in the next week, based on my understanding of who has adopted GRI, to get some feedback about how we can then provide that as a consultation bridge to our colleagues, friends at GRI. And of course, we will get Marianne's views on that, because she has a long-standing relationship with GRI, and in particular doing a lot of training and workshop analyses of the application of the GRI standards. So if you have need for a refresher, a briefing, an update, by all means, reach out to Marianne, and I would encourage Marianne to put her email address in the chat function. In issue 126, so that was the week before last, I asked the question, given that week was the week of Artemis 2, was there space for hope, I asked, or are we now just talking about execution risk? So that edition really looked at some important news around batteries, and particularly recycling batteries in New South Wales. Some updates on carbon removal and it's sort of the the toing and froing that seems to be going on with Microsoft around the use of and the adoption around carbon removal projects. Some additional updates for those in our maritime sector around maritime electrification, as well as some new updates on policy on industrial decarbonisation. There were also, yes, that was the first or the first announcement about ENGA changes and vehicle to grid barriers and some updates around AI-enabled investment scams, which we're now embracing in our reporting to you because it's obviously an important governance issue for you as members. But from a technology enablement point of view, the use of AI in reporting is going to become quite prevalent going forward. And I think we also gave some update on the invested front door pilot that's been done, I think, by Clean Energy Finance and a couple of other public finance sector entities as well. Today's, though, this morning's, which came out, very much looking at the implications of what as I called it, the notion of moving from promise to audit trail. So in that, DECU is now consulting on ENGA's updates, and we've already started a process of reviewing what the ENGA expectations are, and we will be going out to the members shortly with some questions in relation to the issues that are being raised by DECU and the Clean Energy Regulator around the updates to ENGAs. The Clean Energy Regulator also last Thursday, I think it was, released safeguard mechanism data and some interesting insights into, I think it was the period 2024 to 2025. And so we've done a very, very, very high level snapshot of that in the snapshot. But the big news, I think, for last week was twofold. The first was ISO released a new EMS update on 14,000. I forget what its numerical number is, but it is 14,000 and something or other. And then at the same time, there was an announcement by ISO and the Greenhouse Protocol announcing that they're working on a product level carbon accounting platform. So that means, my dear friends, that I need to accelerate the conversation that I have promised a number of the members at a certain level of the member category around a conversation with GHG Protocol, because that's obviously going to become very important if that's going to become adopted, as well as I've reached out to ISO to see if they would be interested in doing a BCSD landscape session on the new ISO EMS standard. The other, just to update you, is there was a report in Responsible Investor, which I couldn't find anywhere else, but I've reported it nonetheless, that there is a sense that the EU is going to morph the CRSD into ISSB. So in other words, they're going to change their reporting framework to more relate to, respond around ISSB. Now, that's not unimportant given the earlier comment I made around the EU Free Trade Agreement, because it means if you are wholly consistent with and aligned with the obligations of ASRS, then it's more likely than not that it's going to then respond to, address the obligations going forward, if this in fact happens, of the EU also adopting it. The other is that the TNFD, Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosure, announced some updated consultation on nature metrics. And I have already done a draft over the weekend for circulation. I think I've actually sent it out this morning to a couple of the members to say, A, are you interested, and B, do you want to dive into it's actually a survey they've sent out, which is always very annoying because you've then got to draw down on the survey questions to then figure out what the thematic conversation is that you want to have to respond to it. But I will be, if you haven't seen it and you're interested in it, reach out via chat to me. Otherwise, you will probably see it if you are at the member category of Learn and Lead, because you get those consultation papers automatically. All right. Anybody else want to highlight anything else that they saw in ESG Snapshot? Because I'm more than grateful for anybody who wants to highlight something and or to give oral feedback as to how they find it. Stunned silence tells me that you all love it, so
No.
I'm going to move on.
Mm.
All right.
No, noticeable improvement in the content and the immediacy of the of information. So it's really
Thank
noticeable.
you for
Good job.
noticing that. Yes, we are aiming to be um, what's the word I'm looking for? More granular and definitely more not more topical because I think it was, but certainly more immediate in terms of what are some of the issues. So thank you for that, um, Anthony. Much appreciated. All right, let's now quickly go to, and I don't know why that one's showing that one. There it is. That's what I want. So why isn't it coming up in the way that I want it? You gotta love the share function in Zoom sometimes. It doesn't always seem to work. There we go. And then I go back to here, and then I do that, and then I do that. So you can get to see anything. All right. I wanted to share with you some basically analytics that we've done on a recent and still current piece of policy that the federal parliament and also Treasury have been undertaking in relation to the aggregation, consolidation, and tidying up of the reporting functions of government in relation to non-financial reporting as well as financial reporting. And in that regard, the highlight that I want to share with you right now, when I go to that point, yes, is to just give a quick reveal on what we found from reviewing the main organisational submissions to the Senate inquiry into the Financial Reporting System Reform Bill 2026. I think the question for us was quite simple. What does the reform mean for business, particularly for the companies that are already dealing with sustainability reporting, assurance, readiness, and investor expectations? And with that, what exactly do you now have to worry about, if anything, or is it something to be alive to coming down the line? So the bill itself is not primarily about imposing any new reporting obligation tomorrow, just to be clear. It is about changing the machinery that's going to shape reporting obligations over time. It's definitely going to be something to keep alive to because it is going to be about who sets accounting, assurance, and sustainability standards, how they are governed, how independent they are, and how practical the system will be for you as companies that implement those standards. The message I want to leave with you today is that the reform is less about new obligations today than it is about shaping how that reporting system that you're going to have to live with is going to look like tomorrow. So what does this bill do? Well, at its simplest, it's going to create the ERA, the External Reporting Australia. Now, it's going to bring about three existing parts of the system: the Financial Reporting Council, the Australian Accounting Standards Board, and the Auditing and Assurance Standards Board. The ERA would then oversee accounting, assurance, and sustainability standards through the Governing Council and specialist boards. So the architecture changed from a number of disparate bodies into one consolidated body with a lot of specialist standard setting capacity then sitting underneath it. Why matter? Why does this matter? Because the architecture effects will affect outcomes. It will affect independence. It'll affect consultation. It will definitely affect the skills around the table that will be involved in this going forward. And it obviously affects how quickly standards are then developed, how carefully they're then tested, and how workable they're going to be for business once they actually land. BCSD, we actually reviewed 11 major organisational submissions. There were individual submissions, but we choose to only look at organisational submissions, not individuals. because organisations then represent scale and size as distinct from an individual per se. BCSD was also one of those submissions, but we're the 12th. So what stood out was the breadth of organisations that have been engaged. It's not just an accounting profession issue. We saw submissions from professional accounting bodies, including CAANZ, and I think I see Karen in there somewhere. Big shout out to Karen McWilliams from the CAANZ. The CPA Australia was also in there. The Law Council, Deakin University, Australian Council of Superannuation and Investors, I think. Superannuation Investors, I think that is. The Group of 100, us, BCSD, Responsible Investor Australia, Association of Australia, thank you, and the Uniting Church Synod, which was a very interesting one. I think to us that breadth tells us that something is going on that's quite important, which is that the future of reporting is not necessarily going to be a technical accounting matter. There are going to be other areas and elements that are going to be taken into account. So for us, we thought that sits at the intersection of finance, sustainability, assurance, governance, legal risk, investor expectations, and public trust, just to name a few. In terms of our position in our submission, which you can, I'm pretty sure it's on our website, but if you haven't seen it, let me know and I can send it to you. We supported the overall direction of the bill, but with targeted safeguards. We support the move towards a more integrated framework, and we support the recognition that sustainability standards now set to sit within the core existing reporting architecture. But our submission argued that the final model needed to protect technical independence, strengthen due process, ensure transition continuity and early resourcing, and constraints over overly flexible governance or ministerial powers, and include a proper post-implementation review. We like to think that our lens that we brought to it was fairly practical in that the system must be internationally credible, but it must work in practice for business. The standard setting system can look elegant on paper, but if it creates uncertainty and duplication and rushed implementation or even weak assurance readiness, then you as business are going to find that that's very unacceptable very, very quickly. If we look across the submissions themselves, the centre of gravity was fairly clear. Most submitters actually supported the direction of the reform, but they want stronger safeguards. Hardly a surprise. This is not merely a debate, I think, about whether reform should happen. It's actually a debate about the quality of the design that's being proposed. Several submitters are saying in different ways, yes, modernise the system, yes, improve the coherence, yes, prepare for sustainability reporting as part of mainstream, but don't weaken independence or the technical quality or the transparent due process that's currently in the process. There were differences in emphasis. So some groups favoured a focus on investor confidence, which is hardly a surprise given the constituency that said it. Some focused on directors and governance, again, constituency. Some focused on transitional burdens. Some pushed a broader revolution, such as social issues, human rights, intangibles, and integrated reporting. I don't think they're going to be addressed in the proposed amendments, if there are any, to the current bill. And one submission, I think it was the Uniting Church, was much more critical of the bill's current form, particularly from an ethics and public interest perspective. But the broad middle ground is proceed, but strengthen the model. So, in terms of the issues that are being highlighted, governance and independence, due process, transition and capability, and future scope. So hardly a surprise there, and I won't go into any detail because they're actually cited in our submission if you want to have a look at them further on. What's going to happen next? Now, the bill is, if I'm not mistaken, well, it's as at this morning, it's still before the House. And the Senate Economics Legislation Committee is to report this week, this Friday. So we'll wait and see. We do know that Treasury is already preparing for the transition. Some of you in our membership are already aware of the fact that we have, and I suspect others have, received an invitation to nominate potential members for the transitional FRC, the Financial Reporting Council, and then for the inaugural ERA Governing Council, with those nominations due by the 27th of April. In addition to those that I've already spoken to or spoken with, because this was raised at the board meeting of BCSDA last Friday, if you are particularly interested in being asked to nominate, please put your name in the chat function so I can then make sure that you are invited through the email that I will be sending, if not today, then first thing tomorrow, when I can remember to do it. So what to watch? Three things. First, whether the committee recommends stronger safeguards around the independence, due process and review. Second, whether the sustainability board is established early and resourced well enough to actually support the implementation. That will be very interesting, and I suspect we can all wait to see what happens in the budget, because the money for that will be in this particular round of budget. What is it? First Tuesday of May. And then the third is whether it becomes a platform for broader reporting beyond climate, whether that's social, human rights, integrated intangibles, and digital reporting. They are all possibilities, but at the moment they probably won't be there, at least in this first tranche. Closing point, the bill may look fairly institutional, but it has consequences that are going to be practical. We like to think that if the architecture is right, then business will get a much more coherent, credible and usable standards process, which will then be more valuable to the market, more valuable for you internally, and just as importantly, valuable for your stakeholders in explaining your ambition, your action and your accountability in relation to sustainability. If it gets it wrong, then the costs are going to show up later in systems, assurance, governance and reporting a burden, and that doesn't really serve anybody's particular purposes. That's why, as I say, we supported the direction while pushing for targeted safeguards. All right, that's it on that. Does anybody have any questions? The slides, if you're interested in using them internally, will be available back through, well, I'll put them back through the membership in the next week or two, if anybody wants to use them. Okay. Or again, you want them now, put that request in the chat function. All right.
Sorry, Andrew, does that mean the acronyms will also change? For example, we call it AASBS2 right now, so in the future it's going to change.
Yeah, I think you'll be calling it the ERA.
Yeah.
Which has incredible overtones to the US in the 1970s, doesn't it? Wasn't that Equal Rights Amendment?
Space. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a bit of a watch this space as to what the acronyms will look like.
The artist formerly known as the AASB, yeah.
Mm.
That's a good one, Haru, because so many of us will live with knowing the old one intimately, and it'll just take a while to learn the new one. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
No, it's a really great overview there, Andrew. Yeah, there's so much that's going on in the space. Yeah.
And I'd like to give a shout out to our interns, because they actually did the upfront analysis, and then I do the analytic, or they did the upfront review, and then I do the analytics attached to it. So it was really quite interesting. It was helpful. There was only 11, but it was still very useful, and it will make for very interesting reading in the next few days, let alone a few weeks.
Yeah.
All right, let's now get terribly practical, because we get to welcome Simon and Forico. Yeah, I was going to portray it as policy architecture, fantastic, but so does the quality of what organisations are doing with all these frameworks on the ground. So to explore this practical dimension, I'm really happy that Simon agreed to come and join us. Simon is the Sustainability Manager at Forico, And for those of you who don't know, Forico's latest natural capital report offers, I think, a really good, useful case study on how nature-related insight can be embedded into real operational and strategic decision making over time. So, Simon, with you, thank you for joining us. You do have access to the slide mechanism, so I will hand over to you and ask you to kick us off with your presentation. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Andrew, and hello, everyone. Yeah, as Andrew alluded to, I'm the Sustainability Manager of Forico here in Tasmania. I might run through what I'm quickly going to cover. Just who is Forico, what we do, and then a very high-level overview of our natural capital report, and then finishing off by the other sort of voluntary coming into mandatory reporting requirements that we're all having to navigate through moving forward. So I just kick off with my slides. Everyone can see those okay?
Yep.
Yes, good. Okay, there we go. Okay, so in terms of who are Forico, we're a sustainable forest manager here in Tasmania. On the right-hand side, you can see the distribution of the resource that we manage across the state. We manage 172,000 hectares of land, approximately 88,000 hectares of that is plantations, which we manage for their wood fibre production, so sort of saw logs, pulp logs, servicing domestic international customers. And we manage close to 77,000 hectares of land, which is natural forest, natural vegetation, which we manage for their conservation biodiversity values. What you probably can't see in the map, but we're very much sort of integrated plantation natural forest resource across the landscape. So they intersect across a catchment, but also with other third-party landowners. And a key part of what we deliver, what we promote, is our certification credentials, where we're certified to global certification standards, the Forest Stewardship Council, and sort of responsible wood, which is aligned to PEFC. You will have also seen these logos on wood-based products throughout your purchases. So in terms of what we do, what we report on, we've produced a natural capital report for 5 years now, starting off in 2020. And I guess that the process of developing our natural capital report has evolved over time. But in essence, what we're doing is promoting and communicating our sustainable forest management credentials, but importantly, identifying the ecosystem services that are most material to Forico and assigning a value to them, so a monetized value, and incorporating that into a sort of balance sheet and profit and loss account. What we have done as well, and through the evolution of the TCFD and TNFD, is prepare integrated reports for both of those. Why did we do that? Well, in essence, both the climate and nature frameworks follow the same. So rather than producing two additional reports, we lumped them into one to save a bit of time, effort, and money. So moving forward into the future, there'll be a need to merge these together into a usable, readable, accessible format. So in terms of going back to our natural capital report and what did we measure, what did we manage, what do we manage, and what did we value? So we did a materiality assessment and picked up the sort of key elements of a forestry business, and clearly the most important part of a forestry business is producing biomass or wood fibre. We have that resource, our asset valued independently every year. So that was a natural initial first step in our sort of regular reporting fabric. And then we've overlaid 3 elements of our materiality assessment, so carbon, water, and habitat. So there's key impacts, dependencies we have on nature, and assigning a value to each one of those, and using credible, auditable frameworks to deliver that. And the work that we've undertaken is pretty much a collaboration across everyone within the Forico business. It's not just down to the sustainability team or me to sort of generate these outputs. We rely very heavily on our finance team. We have an environmental accountant who puts together all the cool numbers in terms of monetized value, and so we can have assurance that the outputs we're generating and incorporating in our natural capital account have meet industry best standards and accounting frameworks and accounting standards. The water metrics were pretty useful in terms of the fact that we could measure how much area we manage in, for example, riparian zones, riparian buffers, and we got a specialist in to actually sort of model the flow, the distribution, the water quality across the landscape to understand what those filtration strips their impact in terms of removing sediment and enabling clear fresh water to flow to downstream users. And in terms of habitat and biodiversity, the monitoring, the measuring that we physically done on the ground to understand within those, specifically those natural forest areas, rather than saying, oh, look, we manage a large area of natural values for their conservation biodiversity outputs. We've engaged ecologists over the last 10 years to actually sort of go out and assess those areas and determine what the values are, whether they be animal, plants, a combination. So we can put together a heat map so we can work out where are our most valuable jewels in the crown across the Forico estate and the Forico resource. So ultimately, what we've done in terms of our natural capital report is as I alluded to earlier, putting nature in the balance sheet and assigning a value to Forico, the value to business, but also putting a value on society. And so we value the natural capital outputs, the ecosystem services of Forico to be sort of $5.9 billion. Unfortunately, we don't generate anywhere near that at the moment. In fact, we're generating carbon ACCUs from the emissions reduction fund through our plantation resource. We're currently providing input into the nature repair market to look at mechanisms that we can contribute to the biodiversity credits of that scheme, so that we can actually sort of generate a revenue stream, because we actually have to actively maintain and enhance those values. And currently, it's a cost that Forico incurs. So removing weeds, undertaking ecological, cultural burning, hazard reduction burning, rehabilitation of stream sides, so that there is a cost associated with all this, and so if we can sort of generate an income stream, then it's a win-win for everyone. So moving on to the reporting landscape beyond natural capital report. So by that I mean sort of TCFD, TNFDs, and the like. Well, there's strong alignment with Forico's purpose and our sustainable forest credentials. I indicated a little earlier, we use it strongly for our communication and promoting what does sustainable forest management mean, not just from an economic standpoint, but in environmental, social, and cultural values. and communicating those benefits to business, but also to society. And by doing the materiality assessments and aligning to the terminology of TCFD, TNFD, what are our impacts, what are our dependencies? So our emissions, our impacts on water, and weed pests and diseases and weeds, whereas sort of the dependencies look around the dependencies on nature, so the sort of soil and energy production, and but also looking at those sort of risks and opportunities, and specifically at the moment we're doing an analysis of risks and opportunities associated with climate. So what does a increased temperature look like on our plantation resource, and what will be the permutations, combinations of a warming climate and the impact on those forest resources that we manage. But also looking at the flip side, the opportunities. So looking at the diversification. So the opportunities that the forest resource will provide through a renewable alternative to concrete and steel, and ultimately looking at expanding that narrative beyond sort of wood fibre production. So I've got the decade of discovery quoted up there. So we've undertaken a lot of on-ground monitoring works, and we've identified the value, particularly in those sort of natural forest areas, interacting with the plantations, that there is habitat for a whole variety of plant animal species, and a few of them are shown there. A very rare orchid, which is within our estate in the northwest Tasmania, along with a red butterfly, and the Tasmanian devil images there. What you see in the background is actually these devils are actually denning in one of our plantations. What we try to communicate and tell to our stakeholders is that plantations and that sort of interface and interaction between plantation, native forest, riparian zones, all provide habitat resource for a whole variety of species, both plants and animals. So how we see the future looking in terms of TCFD, and to a lesser extent of TNFD mandatory reporting, is that it'll help us make more better informed decisions, and looking at those decisions across an integrated landscape, not looking at plantations, not looking at natural forest, native forest in isolation, not looking at treating our fence line as the end of the extent of what we manage, having influence and collaborate with a whole array of stakeholders across the catchment and landscape. And in terms of by undertaking those reporting of the emissions, for example, looking at ways to efficiently manage those emissions that we generate for producing our wood fibre products. So it's also part of our natural capital report is being transparent and open and saying, look, in order to produce these wood-based products, we need to use diesel, we need to use fuel, both for harvesting, carting, and at our processing facilities. So looking at those continual improvement opportunities for decarbonisation throughout the supply chain, but also getting better and better, sort of more integrated, verified, tangible data that people can associate it with people, community, and the ecosystem in which we all find ourselves. But also a key part of the work we're doing currently is looking at setting targets. We've done a lot of measurement, but look, what's our target setting going to look like, and what's achievable and what's deliverable moving forward, and then sort of being able to bring all that information together in a report that's sort of user-friendly and accessible to all stakeholders who are interested in what we do and how we operate. So just sort of quickly finishing off, the key part of this journey, in summary, I would say all boils down to integrity and using credible, reliable, authentic standards, schemes, and measures and measurements. We, as I said at the start of my presentation, we're certified to both global certification standards. A key part of our natural capital report was having one of the big four do a limited assurance on our measures, our values, our deliverables. So we could have some confidence when we publish those metrics that we followed best practice and we used the credible standards that are accessible and available to us. And I guess rounding it all up, a number of those logos you see on the screen are voluntary, specifically the forest certification and the TNFD. But as we're working into mandatory reporting with PCFD and the AASB requirements, they're going to be mandatory, and so we have to be able to report on those as an organisation from July of next year. So improvements we're looking at is the emissions from our contractor workforce, which is the scope 3 emissions. We need to get actual information from them, so we can embed that within our target setting as we look to a decarbonisation future. Andrew, I might just leave it there and hand it back to you.
Thanks, Simon. That last slide's a particularly interesting one because it sort of shows the history and the maturation of reporting to a certain extent, but more importantly, the management of the issue inside the business. And so my question I had was, what do you think are the two findings from this latest report that you think are most useful for business people that are trying to integrate natural capital into strategy? I mean, there's no, is it, and how does it get done in a practical way? Because you've taken more than 5 years to do this. So what's the latest report telling you about how what you're doing is showing integration into the natural capital work you're doing?
I guess the key aha moment for us was doing the materiality assessment, and we just because similar to a lot of other organisations and businesses, we can't measure everything, and it costs money, particularly when you're not generating an income stream at the end of the process. But we sort of started look what are our most important impacts on nature, and sort of being a sort of land manager, a forest manager, it revolved around sort of water quality, water quantity, the carbon generation from our forests, as well as the key requirement of the habitat and biodiversity, and understanding the health and condition of those biodiversity values. And what's clearly the evolution is that not one thing can be treated in isolation. They impact on each other, and being a sort of dynamic landscape in which we operate, and particularly when you look at throwing the impacts of sort of climate change that we're experiencing at the moment, which will have direct impact on the growth of the forests that we manage, that we need to be cognizant of that and ensure that where we need to adapt, we undertake that adaptation strategies.
Fascinating. Questions? Anybody got any follow-up questions or anything they would like to ask of Simon? Feel free to.
I'd like to share with Simon, to be honest, if that's appropriate in an audience. But at STT, because we're a government business enterprise, we've done a lot of this work, but we don't have the same pathways for various reasons. So we have had a comprehensive go at natural capital. Some of those concepts are still alive in other publications. We're tabling our first, we're doing a dry run on mandatory climate disclosures, which is going to board this week. But Simon, the overwhelming theme I've noticed, I'd be interested to see if this is your journey. So first off, is activation in this space it's starting to look more like a freaking cultural change than a reporting change, because we've got half the organisation engaged in these things, and various groups and things set up. And the other thing too is it was commented that a lot of the data, because our industry, Andrew, is very data rich. But in the words of the auditor, none of it was produced with the express purpose of having it disclosed publicly or placed into a framework upon which assurance would be given. So we've got a whole range of data gaps and data provenance. A lot of the technical data was produced by non-accountants. Quite often there's no discipline of keeping ledgers, and it's the I've argued there's the professional discipline about looking after numbers, and you have work papers and reconciliation sheets, which in a lot of our sort of environmental data we just don't have. Is that similar to your in-house experience? Is that what you're finding, or is it a different journey for you?
Yeah, no, we as with you, David, we capture a lot of information from inventory through to sort of financial, through to sort of sustainability credentials. Yeah, we were when we started our natural capital journey, we employed a environmental accountant. And as I indicated earlier on, and she, Kathy, who undertakes those activities, brings all that information together and sort of making sure that we're not capturing metrics or undertaking analysis just for the sake of it. We need to have a goal. We need to have an objective to make sure that those metrics are repeatable. And not just done as a once-off, and that we can use methodologies that are sort of credible and provide a lot of sort of integrity into the process, and what we're trying to ultimately deliver, which is a better climate for us all.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Trent.
Thank you, Simon. Congratulations. I really enjoyed that. Any insights that we can learn from boards needing to understand how to think about risk appetite and tolerances as we embrace this? Any lessons on that journey that the board took, please? Thank you.
Yes, we were very fortunate. The Forico board is sort of very passionate about the organisation, but yet in terms of the risks, the opportunities, this has been a really sort of key framework for the board to understand, what is their risk appetite, particularly in a sort of changing climate, but also looking at those sort of natural elements of the business, being able to understand and communicate that. That's what Tasmanian devil den within a plantation is a key part of the ecosystem and the ecosystem services in which we operate and function. But going back to that first point, Trent, that the Forico investors bought into the Forico business because of a sustainable forest management business. So they were sort of cognizant of the risks, the opportunities, but to be able to sort of communicate that to them has been the natural capital report has been a really, really powerful tool, and they're really championing the opportunity.
Thank you for that. Conscious of time, and we're over time, and that's my fault, but thank you so much, Simon. And it's instructive you end on the topic of, or the cohort of investors, because Tony Goldner was actually in the country last week doing an EY presentation on TNFD, and the audience was only investors. And so you talking about that was quite germane, to the extent that Tony Goldner called out Forico as the gold standard of of natural capital, not just reporting, but also the methodological approach and the cultural drive that goes on in relation to introducing this. So big snaps to you on that one. And as always, thank you so much for supporting BCSD, and thank you for the work that you're doing. Looking very much forward to what version 6 begins to look like, because it's going to have some interesting interweaving with ASRS 2 and then whatever ASRS 1 does to it, S1 does to it over time. So looking forward to that. In wrapping up, don't forget that there is a BCSDA landscape on Wednesday, 5 o'clock. We're joined on that one from Carbon Tracker, who have very, very kindly put together a really stellar group of academics going to be talking about the underlying economic assumption of climate risk and have we got it wrong. And it's really quite interesting what the preliminary work they've been doing, primarily out of the Northern Hemisphere. But I thought that it had some really interesting potential application in Australia as companies are grappling with the issue of how you account for climate risk and what's the broader economic circumstances in relation to putting up an opportunity argument, let alone understanding and helping a board understand, most importantly, what the risk looks like. So we're going to hear from some really interesting academia insights from the University of Exeter and also Potsdam Institute, who are probably two of the leading academic think tanks on this particular topic. So one to look out for. If you haven't registered, you can always go back through the website. It's there. And now it's in ESG Snapshot as well, so you can register via there. But thank you very much for joining. Don't forget to register for next month if you haven't already. If you are already registered, you will get a reminder. And also, where am I going with this? Yes, a reminder that if you haven't joined ESG Snapshot, please do so. And if you haven't shared it with others within the organisation of which you are part of, by all means do so, because you are leaving a member service on the table by not sharing it with them. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. And as I always say when I sign off, look forward to seeing you somewhere in the future. Bye for now.
Thank you, Andrew.